Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me as always is my co host, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, we closed out the last show with the hope of landing a new DC and QB, and as the football gods would have it, our prayers were answered. What do you want to start with first? Do you want to start with the DC pickup, or do you want to start with the QB pickup?
That's a good question. I don't know if I want to go full on eyes for that long. So maybe we talk about him first
Oh,
because I think I keep the entire segment going just like this with Heatherman with our DC.
Let's start with Corey Hetherman, the former DC from Minnesota. He spent one season at Minnesota as their DC. Before that, he had a stint at Rutgers for one season, and he had a minor stint for 2 years at James Madison, which I didn't know during those years when James Madison was kind of rocking and rolling. Just a little brief background. He'll be bringing a 4-2-5 defensive scheme, which I think will play favorably with our talent. Last year, Minnesota ranked fifth nationally in total defense, ninth nationally in scoring defense. They tied seventh nationally in total interceptions and tied ninth in passing defense. Rudy, I have to ask, what is Heatherman's impact in season one? What do you think happens?
It's a good question, right? Because it's something that if you look at what he's done, you're getting kind of what we were asking for in terms of
Yeah.
having like a very simple defensive scheme where players can just pin their ears back, play in space, and play fast. The only thing that's interesting about it is what do we expect? Hopefully, what he did with Minnesota, because if you look at what those stats look like from one season to the next, it's a huge change from year to year. And the only thing that's really changed at Minnesota in that time was defensive coordinator. So I'm wondering if he can do the exact same thing. We'll worry about the long-term stuff down the road, like how he's going to recruit, how he's going to bring in his own talent. But if he can do a similar turnaround like he did with Minnesota, Miami becomes a contender to get in the playoff, only because the defense was the only thing that was missing on that team a year ago.
Yeah, and I think there is a precedent for turning around the defense, not just from his end on a Minnesota side, but we saw what Manny Diaz did his first season as D coordinator under Rick, and the turnaround that our defense had then, and how incredible we were. That was the year we obviously brought in the takeover chain. We brought that out. So I'm expecting something similar in the sense. Mario Cristobal had this to say about Heatherman. He said the reasons mentioned for hiring Heatherman are a four-down defensive front, an explosive play at all three levels, elite communication, and physically and mentally tough units. Cristobal reiterated the four-down front wanting the edge players to be disruptive, communicate, and forcing turnovers and putting pressure on the quarterback. That basically sounds like a silver bullet. It's
Tells you,
like,
tells you a
let's
little
just
bit
go down
about.
the list of all the things we didn't do last year.
Well, and go back to what Miami had to do and adjust last year defensively, because
Yeah.
I think what that kind of tells you though is Miami last year ran a three-man front a lot, and the excuse or the way they wanted to spin it, the spin on it was, well, we have a lot of injuries on our defensive line, so we don't have a lot of experience, so we're going to switch to a three-man front. You're kind of running more of like a 3-3-5 defense. Okay, that explains a lot about why the defensive line play, maybe why the linebackers didn't do so well this year. Because
Yep.
if you're playing if your fourth down lineman is also a linebacker dropping back into coverage, that's a different type of body. That's a different type of technique. That's not something that necessarily works well if you're trying to run a four-man front. And like you said, just to lead it off, 4-2-5, that's kind of what the base defense looks like now in college football across the board. That's the closest thing historically to Miami's old Jimmy Johnson 4-3 defense. 4-2-5 is kind of a natural progression. So if you're looking at how Miami's attacked offenses in the past, this is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think Minnesota was already on an upward trajectory before he came in, Heatherman came in, but you can see from the 2023 numbers, the 24 numbers, everything ticked up. So there were more sacks, more tackles for loss, more interceptions. So he definitely does have an impact, and he definitely does have almost an immediate impact. My question in that now is, how many seasons does it really take? How, in your honest opinion, I know our hope is one. I hope we turn it around next season. But how many seasons do you think it realistically could take? Maybe you stick with your same answer to get this defense back to being that fearsome defense.
I think it's kind of like we have to see year over year, because given the changes in personnel in college football, you could have a great season, but if
Yeah.
you have a total different cast of characters that comes in, you only hope that they could take to the philosophy the way that the previous roster did. So in this day and age, I think all you can worry about is year to year. I don't think you can worry about building a fearsome defense over 3 to 5 years. And that's something that maybe Corey Hetherman noticed too, because he may not have the same luck at Minnesota the next year, even though he just signed that extension like in December. So I think it's something that's a problem that you have to kick down the road for now and just focus on this season. So can they get back to look, anything was better than last year. So as long as you
Yeah,
can hold
that's
teams
true.
to look, if you can hold teams to 28, if you can hold them under 30, that's a significant improvement. That's not the old Miami standard, but I think beggars can be choosers in this scenario to say, I'll take under 30.
Right, or, for me, it would be more of like, "Hey, do you do what the elite teams do? Do you beat the teams handedly that you're supposed to beat? And do you stay in the tough games and get the edge in the harder games, you know? And that's what I'm kind of hoping with our defense. So, like, for example, for Notre Dame next year, if they bring back a bunch of their starters, and let's just say UF continues this ride of momentum, you know, going into those games, I don't mind if they put up 35 plus as long as our offense is ticking and we're keeping them at bay. And then in the other games, you know, the games we should be winning, we're holding them to either donuts or low double digits. You know what I mean? Like that's where I don't mind giving up 35 points a game to a really good team, right? You would expect that. But in the first season is what I'm saying. But going into the second, third season, hopefully he's still here. I would like to see a little bit more of kind of what we're seeing in the CFP, where the better teams are still holding the good teams, like in Ohio State, which we'll talk about later. How Texas was still able to hold Ohio State to 28 points, even though they were throttling the first two teams they played in the CFP. Now, you had alluded, Rudy, to some of the players and personnel changes that could occur over the next couple of years and how that could affect Heatherman's, you know, impact on our defense. Are there any players from Minnesota or other teams you think he can possibly bring in or that you would want him to bring in now that he's coming here?
Look, there's that defensive back that's being held hostage still in Wisconsin that I think would be a
Yeah.
great addition because Miami needs as many secondary players as possible. And I think this whole picture hasn't really come fully into hasn't fully developed yet because there are position coaches that are there. There's jobs that are open at Miami, and there's some that are just
Mhm.
new departures. So like Derek Nicholson just today announced that he's leaving Miami. He's taking the job over at he's going to a Big Ten Mizzou. He's going to the SEC.
Mhm.
And he's going to be the linebackers coach there. The linebackers play was not very good the past couple of years. I wouldn't put that all on Derek Nicholson, former Florida State alum. He actually played. He's our age. He played on the Florida State team same time that we were in school. So looking to see who comes in there. Maybe they bring in some good talent on that end, given that linebacking play is always important in a defense. There's only two of them in a 4-2-5 formation. So there's a lot that they're being asked to do. There's a lot of they have to go
Yeah.
into pass coverage. You can't miss those matchups anymore because look, with 5 defensive backs, if they pull out a tight end or a running back, that linebacker is going to have to be on them most of the time if you don't have a safety to man up with them. So I think that's going to be very important to do because, as you noticed from Miami last year, Popo Aguirre got hurt. That really hurt things. Francisco Marinoa, who is no longer with the team, declaring the NFL, didn't have his best year last year. Vespa Saint had some flashes of glory, but then he also had some moments where he didn't do so well. So I'm interested to
Yeah.
see where that position goes and if any talent kind of comes attracted with that new hire. And the same thing with Joe Salavea, who left to Arizona. We talked about this before, but the whole Samoan connection. They brought in a new member from the nation of Samoa to be part of Miami's front office. So they got the bloodline still going through there, but they're missing a defensive tackles coach. You still have Jason Taylor coaching defensive ends, but you need somebody with some interior, defensive line experience to kind of make that unit whole.
So with the vacancy at linebacker coach now apparent, what do you think about the rumors of Randy Shannon possibly being on the move and maybe returning?
I wouldn't mind it. I mean, it's something that I look. There was already a rumor. I think Bruce Warner, who was always with Dono for a long time, he's a guy that's connected to all these players in the '80s and the '90s, even into the early 2000s. There was a clamoring from them that they wanted Randy Shannon back in some way, shape, or form. Granted, he's hostage right now at Florida State. They're saying that they got rid of him, but he was like the interim defensive coordinator. When
Yep.
they lost their current guy, he's been there for a few years. He's jumped around a lot. So he's been between UCF and the University of Florida and Florida State. Um, I think it fits
He's filling
perfectly.
his Florida college's bingo card. He's like, "All right, got this one. Done."
Yeah, he's getting them. I mean, as long as it doesn't go to like University of Jacksonville or South Florida, something like that. FAU, he should be okay. Um, but I think it complements the whole defensive philosophy really well. It's just a matter of is the rumors that I've been hearing is that because of how he was let go in like 2010,
Right.
there's been a lot of egos between the board of trustees and those who let him go. And also, there was a lawsuit at the time, I believe, in
I
terms of
remember
like
that.
wrongful termination that happened. So that's not to say that the bridge was completely burned, but maybe bringing him on in like an analyst or a position coach um, thought is less damaging than having him as a defensive coordinator or somebody that you could say is kind of close to the head coaching tree. I don't know whether that's something Randy Shannon would want to do because it's kind of a downgrade for him. I don't know
Right.
if the love of alma mater is really that big of an impact to say I'd love to come back and help specifically from a position that he played, in college and coached for a long time as well. He was also the linebackers coach for the Miami Dolphins when Jason Taylor was there as a player. So there
Yeah,
is
that
all
was
this,
another reason. Yeah.
yeah, there's all this ideas of like there's good chemistry between the staff. Look, I think he would be a big help. So if people could put their egos aside and just kind of assemble the best staff, I'd be happy to have him. I don't think it matters from a recruiting perspective so much anymore, given the distance away from the high school kids that he has now. Remember, his son was our age. I went to high school with Xavier Shannon, brought him over from FIU, was on Miami's offensive line. He was our center and like or one of our offensive linemen for a few years there between like 2006, 2007, 2008. So I'd be happy to see it. I don't think the rumor is like a big deal, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Depends on what the hiring situation looks like.
Yeah, I just thought with the vacancy, I thought that was a kind of a convenient little occurrence that was going on there. But Heatherman wasn't the only pickup we had. Last week, the Canes also got a surprise commitment from Carson Beck, who committed to UM less than 48 hours after hitting the transfer portal. Rudy, is this a good move for both sides? And I'd like you to approach it from both sides. Is this a good move for Carson, and is this a good move for UM?
Well, which one do you want me to start with? You want me to start with UM or with Carson Beck?
Wherever you want, my man.
I'll go with UM first. I think you know what Miami got during that Pop Tarts Bowl because you had an entire half of watching Emory Williams play. We already addressed all of the crap that came out of that. Even
Yeah.
Mario Cristobal addressed it this week in a press conference. I won't use the word on YouTube, but he did use BS. I'll give it
Yep.
in American Sign Language for everyone to know that this wasn't like a spur of the moment thing where he just like walked on the sideline and said, "I'm done, bro." That's not how it worked.
No.
So there was a game plan put in place. They knew you were going to get a second half quarterback tryout, and needless to say, you didn't get the performance that you were expecting out of your second year player who started a couple games, won you a big game last year for Miami. They knew they had to go looking for a quarterback. You ended up getting the number one quarterback off the board who made himself available after the fact. Remember, he declared for the NFL draft at first, had that UCL surgery, and looks like his draft stock would have definitely taken a little bit of a hit. So what's to say you're going to a place like Miami where you're getting offered more money in NIL than you would have gotten in a rookie contract, and you have a chance
Yep.
to raise your draft stock? Kind of a no-brainer. And also from Miami's perspective too, you've got a guy who's only going to be there for a year. You have this full Georgia connection now in the quarterback room. Should Emory Williams stay, you've got Carson Beck, who is a not he's a Florida high school player, but
From
in a
Jacksonville,
Georgia.
yeah.
Right. In a very might as well be Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Uh, from
Exactly.
transfer from Georgia, from South Georgia, North Florida program. Luke Nickel, who is just a state champion Georgia quarterback who played in the Mercedes-Benz, dome, and Emory Williams, who got three quarterbacks all with big Georgia ties. I think that's a great person to also learn under for Luke Nickel. And for if Emory Williams sticks around, that's two amazing quarterbacks. You could say that you've been learning under to hopefully get some more experience and reps with that second team. So from Miami's perspective, huge no-brainer. And if you're Carson Beck, look, everyone's giving Hannah Cavender all of giving her flowers for recruiting Carson to come over here. This is Katie Myers doing. Okay. This is former
Oh,
retired women's basketball coach Katie Myers doing because she brought the Cavender twins to Miami. Without no Cavender twins, there would be no Carson Beck. So make sure you thank Coach Meyer.
yeah.
I think this is
I saw, I think it was on the Cover 3 podcast, the Little Domino, Big Domino. And they were talking about how it started with TCU. I forgot what the player's name was from TCU, basically
there was
forcing Cavender to come to Miami, which then led to Carson Beck coming to Miami.
It was one of the girls who transferred from LSU to
CU, yep.
TCU. And
CCU,
from her
yep.
going over there, one of the Kavner twins wouldn't get any playing time, so that brought them back to Miami. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you some stats for Carson Beck, last year he threw for 3,485 yards, which is a little bit down from his 2023 season, which was his standout season, which he had nearly 4,000 yards. 28 touchdowns last season, 12 interceptions, which was up from his 2023 season, which he had 6, and he finished with an 80.8 QBR, which made him the 8th ranked QB in the country. He did win the CFP in 2021 and 2022 as a backup. He led Georgia to a 12-1 record and 11-2 season as a starter. So he's had some success as a starter, technically one as a backup. I would also push back on this season with the note that Georgia's top 3 receivers were all transfer portals from last season. It was their first season in. So not only did he lose Bauer and McGonkey, like he also got 3 players he's never played with, had zero chemistry with. Now we can kind of bring that in over to us, and that could kind of be a con for us because he'll be playing with a whole set of new players. My hope, though, is that the players that we have are young. They're ready to work with him. They'll maybe mesh to his style a little bit more, and we can see some success in there. I'll push back a little bit. I think on his side, I think it was absolutely the best move he could have done. I mean, his numbers were he was a third day guy, they were saying, so 4th or 5th round, they were thinking, based on his show this year, on top of the UCL surgery that he just had, making him not available probably till late spring, early summer. So I think on his end, obviously a no-brainer. I think for Miami, it was a 50-50. I think it's a coin flip. And this is where I go with it. I think it's a good thing because you're right. What we saw in the Pop-Tarts Bowl was a little questionable with Emory Williams. That's not to say that he can't get better in the spring and summer and then even into fall camp. But again, I think in terms of the drop off, again, we were talking about last show, momentum. Momentum isn't just in the games, it's between each game, and it's especially into the offseason. How do you look? How do you carry that? How do you sustain that? And I think bringing a guy in like Beck, who you could maybe still haven't seen any movement, still haven't heard any messages, but apparently there's still a wide receiver out there that wants to sign with UM. I haven't heard anything, haven't seen anything. But hopefully you can do that. And that's what bringing in a guy like Beck is. My hesitation in bringing Beck in is not only the UCL surgery that he had on his throwing arm, nonetheless, but it is the fact that again, you kick the can down the street, right down the road when you bring in Beck, because at some point you do need to develop your own talent, and if you don't start developing your own talent, recruits aren't going to want to come here. And there's only so many times you can play the portal lottery or you know what I mean? Or some sort of Russian roulette with portal quarterbacks. I mean, we'll see. We saw what happened with DJU. We got lucky with Cam Ward, but my biggest fear is that this could be, instead of Cam Ward 2.0, this could be DJU 2.0, which is kind of what I'm worrying about. What do you think Mario's plan B is if Beck ends up being a DJU 2.0?
Yeah, I think at that point you just have to find one of your young guys because I think they came into this season knowing this is going to be the last round of transfer portal quarterbacks that Miami's going to be looking at in the near future or for moving forward because you've got a stud in Luke Nickel who's there, state
Yeah.
champion quarterback, has all these great numbers, has been tearing it up across all these different competitions, the 7-on-7s, like you name it, he's done some great things. So if you're Miami, that's got to be your guy next year. I think you needed somebody as a stopgap because you have to get that defense in order and you have to have a system that puts in place that you can
Yeah.
bring in some good talent and attract on that end because you have to play complementary football. If this was a year to do it, you're going to be seeing a lot of low scoring games from Miami where we'll look at the Miami teams that we kind of matured with over time, where they had great defenses where they just couldn't put points up to win games. And that's
Yeah.
something
Okay, so in the
that
inverse of that, let's look at the
I
inverse
think
of that.
Miami was at risk of doing again or
Uh, Lost you there, Rudy. You still there? Okay.
yeah, I'm here. I just
Oh,
heard
okay. So I
inverse
was
and
just
that
going to
was where I
say
lost you.
let's look at the inverse of that then. So let's just say he's not DJU 2.0. What do you think Beck's ceiling is? Could he be a Cam Ward 2.0? Not statistically, but in the sense of achieving great success, first and only year. What is Beck's ceiling?
I think his ceiling is kind of similar to the record that Miami had last year. If it's all of the same pieces in terms of like, if that defense doesn't improve, Miami can still win 10 games next year with Carson Beck. It's a harder schedule, slightly, but at the same time, he's not a bad guy. I mean, nobody's going to beat Cam Ward. So if you're going out there saying we're
Right.
not going to grab a guy in the portal who's not like Cam Ward, you're going to be sitting in the portal for you'll never pick up a quarterback in 10 years because he's a generational guy. So can he do it? Sure. I mean, he made some good throws last year. We criticized him on this show. I know I did. I looked at him like looking like he was Hollywood with all of his like mock turtlenecks and the chain sticking out and like pretend like he was the man already. Like, kids make mistakes, but when he was out there on the field, he made some good reads, and you can't fault the guy when your receivers don't hold on to the ball. And hey, I think he learned a little bit about Miami last year because one of those transfer wide receivers you were talking about was Colby Young. Couldn't ask you what was said on that. But go, oh, I see why he went in the portal, because he
Yeah.
wasn't going to play at Miami next year, given what they had. So, ooh, if this guy left because he was looking for playing time, I need to go down and find out who those receivers are. So I think Miami's ceiling is the same. It's the matter of what's the defense going to do, because they're going to lean more on the running game offensively for Miami this year. You got some new players that are coming through. That offense, even if it's, 7 points less per game on average, that's still one of the better Miami offenses historically. So for me, I'm more concerned about the defense than I am about Carson Beck. He could probably, lose this game, but I'm just based off of what we've seen the last couple of years, it's hard to blame a loss on the offense.
Yeah, I think with the right weapons around him, it's been proven through the 2023 season. I mean, he had basically almost Cam Ward numbers, 3,900 yards basically through the air. So I think if he has the right weapons, I think if we can get an elite wide receiver on top of some of our young guys who can get some experience and playing time. And then again, I would love to see us utilize the tight end a little bit more like we did this year. I mean, this year was head and shoulders above the year before in 2023. I mean, we utilized the tight ends way more this year. I would like to see a little bit more. We were talking about it again. We were like, I think Dawson's allergic to doing the traditional screen with the lineman. Would love to see that. And I feel like that would also play into his, in terms of like easing him into the offense, you know what I mean? Give him a quick dump, like, okay, check down. We're good to go. Last question on Beck, and I think this is one of my most curious questions. How long do you think this was in the works? Because the decision was made within less than 48 hours of him entering the transfer portal, which I think a lot of people, and there was rumblings even before, the CFP that he may even enter the transfer portal. How long do you think this was in the works? Because obviously this just didn't happen. It wasn't like Carson Beck entered the transfer portal and Mario picked up the phone and was like, "Hey, Carson, would you like to come play?"
Yep. I have a feeling that it was probably, I think it's a look, I don't think it's a coincidence that it went the exact same way that Cam Ward's announcement did, where there was more rumblings about where he was going to transfer to before, declaring for the draft and all of that. But I think it's a similar timeline in the sense of, let's see what the draft grade looks like, and then I'm going to make my decision to come back. I just think the whole do not contact in Miami being top of that list is due to a number of factors. One, you kind of have your back channel already through your personal life, knowing the campus, having your significant other come to your games all the time. There's already that connection there. So from a personal perspective, it's kind of a no-brainer to say, well, why am I going to have to worry about you keep flying back and forth? If Miami didn't have the year that they did, if Miami didn't have the pieces in there, Miami would not have been in this conversation. I just think the fact that this perfect storm of saying they have a vacancy, they already had some fantastic offensive production from the year before. Now, instead of being a quarterback killer, Mario Cristobal has a list of quarterbacks he's bringing the NFL between Justin Herbert and now Cam Ward, and Carson Beck can be the third one. So I think that all came together quickly because it was kind of a no-brainer in that sense of who else was out there. There's a story that just broke today. We're recording this on a Thursday, that Carson Beck rejected offers, one from Georgia to,
Yeah,
it might try to do the thumbs
return.
up, to keep him there because they didn't want
Yep.
him to leave the portal. Because, hey, guess what? You had your Gunnar Stockton moment where they cheered him in the SEC title game, and then you got into the college football playoff, and maybe you're
Yeah.
not so sold on Gunnar Stockton anymore
Yeah.
because it's a true freshman playing. The other one was Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, apparently. I wonder what that's going to do, the
Yeah.
whole Jalen Burrow situation. But that's two big SEC programs that wanted him right away. So in terms of money, this wasn't I'm getting more money from Miami. This is just everything kind of
Makes sense.
plays out. Great
Yeah, it's
relationship with the family, all that. Like that makes perfect sense. And to say, I'm going to the ACC where it's a clown show, maybe I could win there because I've already seen what the SEC is like. And, I'm doing something different. If you watch a lot of these quarterbacks who have had success in the transfer portal, I'm talking about like the early generation of quarterbacks, like your Caleb Williamses, your Jalen
Right.
Hurtses. They didn't go within the conference. They went other places. Jalen Hurts went to Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley went to USC and brought Caleb Williams from Oklahoma to USC out there with him. I think that's just a change of scenery.
Yeah, I think that helps. I think, yeah, something tells me that probably somewhere, I want to say after the SEC title game is probably when the decision and when the gears really started moving. I think, because here's the thing. I think had he played outstanding during the SEC title game, went through the playoffs unscathed and balled out and possibly even won, I think he still would have been at worst a second round. You know what I mean? And he still would have taken that and moved on. But I'm starting to see this, and it makes a lot of sense when you really look at the numbers, that a lot of these guys will just stay an extra year and take that extra money because the money he's making now obliterates. I mean, I saw this post on Instagram where it was comparing quarterbacks in the that would be going into their second or third season. And I mean, he's making easily 3 million over what most of them are making. Some of them are only making, I think Brock Purdy's only making like $956,000. I was like, what? That is
Yep.
wild that this guy's gonna be making this much money. And they're saying it's upwards of 4 million. So
You could
not a
even
bad cash in.
say that if he didn't get injured, he still might have taken his chance at the NFL because you
That's
could
what I'm
say if
saying.
he,
That's what I'm saying. Like, if had he not gotten injured in the SEC game, he
yep,
would have balled out somewhat and won the game and then gotten into the CFP. And let's just say he even lost in the finals, right? And like played Ohio State for the final. I still think he would have gone to the NFL. You know what I mean? I think the injury coupled with how the season ended kind of, he just saw, he was like, hey, like Cam Ward did it. It makes sense. It was like a perfect aligning of the stars. Again, I don't know how much luckier Mario can get. This guy, again, I believe in him and I want him to win, but I mean, we really need to see that defense turn around next season because this guy is either that or I mean, maybe he hits something else next season where he gets a stud from on the defense. I don't know, but it's wild that this occurred the way it did because again, it was like one of those like pipe dreams that you kind of like fantasize with your friend, like what if this happens, and then boom, it came to
yeah.
reality.
I think too, like the criticism of Carson Beck from the last year with his receivers and stuff, like he could have erased all of that from having a good combine. You could say like, hey,
Well,
look, here's the way I throw, here's how I do that stuff. You know what I mean? Like I think
I,
now he's going back to the rehabilitate because he didn't have the health to do it.
I'm not even, I don't, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even put it all on Carson Beck just for the pure fact that you look, Georgia doesn't have a good O line like we could. They couldn't run the ball as effectively as we could. So
Yep.
when you put those two things, it's a very similar thing that Cam Ward had, right? Cam Ward didn't have weapons, right? And he didn't have a good O line. And then look what he did, right? And then what made Cam Ward even more valuable going into it is that he seamlessly transitioned from one like OC to another, like it was nothing, still put up video game numbers. I think Carson Beck knows in the back of his mind, he's like, hey, I could play in that offense. I can not only improve my draft stock, but I can improve it drastically by showing that I can go to another program in another conference, dominate hopefully, and get to that first day. You know what I mean? And so I
Yep.
think again, you give him our O line, you give him the running backs that we have, the stallions that we have that to hand the ball off. I mean, worst comes to worst, the guy you run the ball 60% of the time. You know what I mean? Like it's a no brainer to me. I think. But
Yeah, I
moving
totally
over,
agree.
we had some incredible. I'm not gonna lie. This Final Four was probably the best Final Four we've had ever in the history of the CFP. Let's start off with Penn State Notre Dame, the first game. To me, that was probably the best game I think of the college football playoff so far. What do you think?
It was a good game. The only thing that I didn't like was, and other people have kind of said this in passing since, like Dave Portnoy probably put it best, is like, I forgot about Penn State over the course of the year. I looked at what they did in the playoffs against SMU and Boise State and got a little too high up on my horse thinking that they would pull it off in that regard. Because I dogged Penn State all year saying they were a
Yeah,
contender. I thought they should have lost at USC. There was a few games down the stretch, like they looked pretty good in that Big Ten championship game
almost
because
lost
they
to Minnesota. Our Heatherman almost had him.
exactly. So there were times where I remember saying all year, it's like, I don't think Penn State deserves to be here. The record says they do, but if you look at the way they're going to play in the field, I think that kind of showed in that game against Notre Dame. I think that the moment just got too big because Drew Aller looked like Will Howard against Oregon earlier in the season at the end. If you watch the way Drew Aller like finished off that game, you just went, "Oh, what happened?" I think everybody felt good about Penn State with the ball with 2 minutes, under 2 minutes to go.
And he
There
did. You
was
look, I mean, other than that late pick, I mean, if you really think about it, that late pick is what changed that game completely because in the first half, Penn State had the momentum. It looked like they were going to win, even though it was only 10-3 at halftime. It was a very one-sided 10-3. Like it could have easily been 17-3 at that point. You know what I mean? And so you get to the point, and then in the second half, they're going back and forth for scoring under 2 minutes left, and Drew Allard's, got the ball. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that game could have gone. We could have had the exact inverse result with, Penn State driving it down in the closing seconds, kicking an easy field goal, maybe leaving less than a minute on the clock to give Notre Dame the ball. But again, I thought that it was the closest game by far, and statistically, Penn State beat Notre Dame. I mean, you look
Yep.
at it, they outrushed them, fewer turnovers. The one turnover that Penn State had was the critical one that they lost. It was the luck of the Irish, that they they got there. And I think we could be proven wrong, depending on how we see Notre Dame play, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Notre Dame play Ohio State. I think if Notre Dame gets blown out by Ohio State, then yes, you're right. Like I think we got high on the SMU Boise State train. But I think if they play close, I think this could show that, like, because again, remember, Penn State played Ohio State really well. It was just costly mistakes they made in that game that is the reason why they lost. You know what I mean? I think that was the game where it was like 2013 or something like that. It was like a really low scoring Big Ten like slugfest.
Yep.
Partial Timmy Jimmy fight. Um, but again, I thought it was a great game. I was just really surprised that, and this has been the criticism all year, and it's funny how someone had mentioned, I forgot who it was, that the teams that have made it to the finals have been the teams that have made the adjustments that they needed to make. So you look at Georgia, who's been hot and cold, right? They got eliminated, and the reasons why all the champions got eliminated, right? For whatever reason they did. But then you look at teams like a Penn State, right? Who all season their main criticism, who were their wide receiver weapons, right? They didn't have any. And it showed with not a single reception by a wide receiver. That was insanity to me. When I went back, I saw that stat and I was like, no, let me go back and look at the box score. I looked back and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Tight end, wide receiver, running back. I was like, that's crazy. And so to me, it's like, man, if you would have just had a key wide receiver, you could, I mean, James Franklin would easily be making it into the finals.
Wasn't there a drop in the end zone too from a wide receiver during one of
Yeah, I
those?
mean,
There was some.
you watch that game and it's funny because yeah, I ragged on Penn State too, but then I look and I'm like, their defense is pretty stout. Defense is looking good, and let's not forget Notre Dame was after the Northern Illinois game was blowing teams out. Granted, they weren't playing quality teams, SEC teams, but they were playing some pretty good teams and beating them handily, which is what good teams should do. So to hold Notre Dame to 27 like that, and again, the 27 and those were, I mean, this game could have easily been 10-17. You know what I mean? So I thought it was a great game. Moving over to the Cotton Bowl, what could have been a blowout and what probably should have been a blowout was actually more interesting than expected. This was another game, I think, that was settled by a costly turnover at the most inopportune time. I mean, you got Texas at the 1 yard line. I mean, I don't know if Sark is ever gonna live that down. Like, how do you get past that? You're 1 yard line, you got four downs. How do you not score?
Yeah, no, I think Ohio State, they kept Texas around a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
it's just, yeah, that's one of those moments that you wonder what could have been, and it's one of those where that's Quinn Ewers' last moment to Texas too. Highly likely. I mean, I don't think there hasn't been a consensus on that yet. I don't think he's declared for the transfer portal. But I don't think he's going to the NFL just
I
yet
think he
either.
declared for the NFL though.
Did he? I
Yeah,
wonder
I'm
if
pretty
that's
sure. I'm pretty sure he sent his papers in.
okay, because there was a rumor at one point in time that he may transfer to like Notre Dame next year or
Yeah,
something like that,
I
which
thought
would be
Notre Dame. I thought that would be a great fit for him. I thought that would be
Yeah,
a great fit. Or even they were saying that, and the other rumor was him going back to Ohio State. Could you imagine that?
that would have been wild. I mean,
Right?
I wonder what
Finishing.
they're going to. That is another question for next year because Will Howard's a one and done. So what are they
Yeah.
going to do next year at quarterback? They've been doing the portal lottery for a while too.
Well, I think Air Nolan just entered the transfer portal also, I'm pretty sure, which
Mhm.
was their backup. And then they had that one kid from Alabama. What was his? I forgot what his name was, but he was a transfer. He left this year to go. He was an Alabama recruit. That's there. I think that's going to be their guy.
They also kicked some TikTok influencer off the team who didn't play at all. I don't know if you saw that
No,
story.
I did not. Tell me
There
this.
was
Fill
there
me
was
in.
some kid on the Ohio State team that apparently was posting TikToks, and there might be another paid subscription service that's known for more like nudity than anything else. I don't want to say it on here, but it rhymes with
Schlerling
I'm
Schlans?
not. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Apparently, he was kicked off the team like earlier this season, but he was posting stuff like, "Hey, we're at the Cotton Bowl," and he was using photos of like last year's Cotton Bowl game. And now they officially said, well, we're kicking you actually off the team officially now to say stop.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's exactly like the distraction that I think you would clamor for in terms of looking for an upset. But as wild as that Cotton Bowl was, I still feel like Ohio State, unfortunately, is in the driver's seat in this situation. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's it going to take? Do you think that Notre Dame kind of rushed things a little bit with Riley Leonard's return? Because I feel like after you saw the hit and they knew exactly how poorly they were playing in that first half with their backup, it makes me think like, did they lower the protocols a little bit there? Like, hey, who's your coach? Lou Holtz. Good enough for me. He was coaching
Yeah.
in there, Riley.
Well, I mean, let's look at it realistically because I was in the third quarter, right?
I think
When
it was in the first half, and then he came back in the second half.
okay, so yeah, I mean, if you don't have Riley Leonard, I mean, you look at those plays, especially those two passes to Greathouse, especially on that final drive. I mean, if you don't, if that's not Riley Leonard, I don't think they win.
I
I don't
agree
think that,
with you.
and I don't think so. I think yeah, you have to eliminate. Yeah, that's good enough. Good enough. Yeah, man, good. You're go back in. Go
Yeah,
back in.
you're
Give him some smelling salts. He's great. He's great. With the Cotton Bowl, just to wrap it up before we get to the championship game, I I thought again, I thought Texas played a great game. It was just at crucial times they made the wrong mistake. And everyone's going to focus on the one play of the toss on second down, which I yeah, it was a bad play, but at the same time, you've got why are you like I get the fourth down you're throwing, you got to come up with something you're Steve Sarkisian. You have got to come up with something that not only protects your quarterback in that final fourth down, but something that's got to have like that. I feel like every coach has a break in case of emergency. Like they have three or four plays that they are just like the annexation of Puerto Rico, basically. And that's when you use it. And that play that they were running it was very bland vanilla to me, and it left Ewers open. And I'm not trying to like Monday morning quarterback, but it's just like I just the two back to back play calls, I was just like, I wonder if the moment got too big for Sark.
it makes me wonder too, in the sense of this literally just came to mind because I didn't think about it during the game, but you're talking about the Pete Carroll coaching tree.
Hmm.
Another Pete Carroll disciple that's having trouble at the goal line. Pete Carroll was the guy that decided we're going to throw instead of hand the ball off to
Marshawn Lynch, yeah.
to Marshawn Lynch in the Super Bowl. Granted, he didn't have that play where they knew the play was coming like New England did, but it's just something about like I think
Or
Ohio State shutting down that run game really did numbers in terms of well, what are we going to do in this situation because you can only do so much.
and I get it because like Texas is playing with their third string quarterback. I mean, running back. I get it, 100%. Like, it's not going to be your first go to. But I think if you're going to play the play you played on fourth down, then your second and third down play should have been absolutely gut run. Which I mean, the first play was a run gut up the middle. But like, you do that three times. Then you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep pushing, and you hope, and then you get them to think, okay, like they've done this four times, or you do it on the third down, you flip it, and you go for the pass on the third down as opposed to the pitch, and then you run it on the fourth down to try and confuse them. Yeah, it was just to me, it was really sad because at that point the game was over. I mean,
Yeah.
they had played tough, but and then the extra touchdown was. icing on the cake. I think realistically it was in garbage time basically. So in terms of like the overall momentum of the game, it was nothing, but it was sad to see Texas go down the way they did, but they played a great game and we'll see. I mean, a lot of Texas players, I'm not sure if you saw that a lot of Texas players are entering the draft, which is
Yep.
it's going to be interesting. I mean, again, they're kind of like a little Bama junior too, like a little Georgia junior too. They've got some depth, but we'll see how they turn out next year. Moving to the championship game, we've got Ohio State versus Notre Dame. The game I could care less about. I could not care less. I'm going to watch it mainly because I love college football. But I mean, if a meteor, you know, hit the stadium, wouldn't be sad. Be like, whatever. Lou Holtz will be dragging his body, apparently. I'm not sure if you saw that tweet to the game. What are you looking out for?
I just gotta start driving now because I'm too old to get on an airplane. I have to wear my Depends. If you just sit there and it gets a little turbulent, I'm not gonna make it to the lavatory. So make sure I have an entire row for myself. I need special transportation to get to the stadium. I'm just so excited. I haven't been to Atlanta since I coached at South Carolina all those years ago. It might have been when Georgia Tech was still a member of the SEC. I don't remember if they had moved yet, but it's just going to be a great time regardless of what happens in that game. If Notre Dame loses again, it's fine. It's really fine. It just shows that there is a formula now in college football where you could still be good and you could play a cupcake schedule and you could have NBC give you $50 million a year and be competitive.
Yeah, and now they don't even need to stay independent because they've got the extra 20 million from the college football playoff that they don't have to share with anyone else in their conference because they're
You
independent.
How dangerous is this if Notre Dame actually wins this game to be the national champion in terms of what the college football landscape looks like? Because the longest time, everybody was clamoring college football's passed Notre Dame by. They may look like a good team, and then they get into the college football playoff, and or they get into they get a bid because they're Notre Dame and they play nobody over the course of the regular season.
Well,
That's a
I
winning formula now.
I mean, well, here's okay. I wanted to talk more about the game, but let's just get into some tinfoil hat theory stuff,
Oh, briefly, then we'll go back to the game. I think
Yeah.
they have no chance in hell. I'm going to finally say that Ohio State, I think I've been dogging Ohio State long enough that they can't do it. They're going to do it, and I'm going to hate myself for it, but it's better than the
Yeah,
alternative.
I'm with you too. I mean, let's just get it out of the way. I think we're
Yeah.
both picking Ohio State. We'll talk about how Notre Dame wins and how Ohio State wins after this brief little monologue will go on. But if Notre Dame actually pulls this off, here's where I go with all of this stuff. One, I think the Bears are going to come knocking. I think the Bears are going to be busting down Marcus Freeman's door. And I think Marcus Freeman may actually take it because while I think he does love Notre Dame, that's not his alma mater, and he will have beaten his alma mater to get the national championship. He'll also be the first black coach to ever win a national championship. There'll just be so many accolades that I think the next logical step is the NFL. And it's not a big move. I mean, South Bend to Chicago is like a 30-minute drive,
Yep.
so it's not like he's moving across the country to like take over the Chargers, like what um Jim Harbaugh had to do. So I think, I mean, if he wins this, I think it'll be great for Notre Dame. And I know you talk about the landscape of culture, but I think it won't really do anything because at that point, I don't think Notre Dame will be able to carry on. Like it's not going to be like they're a powerhouse program. I think this is kind of, and here's the thing too that people have to remember: a lot of Notre Dame's key players and impact players are all like seniors and like fifth year seniors. Like these aren't young. This isn't like a young unit. These are people who chose to come back for like passed up on the NFL last year to come back this year for this championship. So it's not like, and again, that's not to say that they won't be competitive next year. I think they absolutely will be, but they'll be losing a lot of key players who got them here. So with that in mind, you think about that, the transfer portal, all the stuff that comes along with being a head coach in college football. I wouldn't be surprised if of a bunch of schools, even if he loses though, too, come knocking on Marcus Freeman's door. On top of that, here's where the tinfoil hat theory comes in. If he beats Ryan Day, I, I don't know if Ryan Day keeps his job, and I would not I would not be surprised if OSU's, board of trustees on Marcus Freeman's door, hey, bud,
I
come
just
back.
realized I just realized our tinfoil hat theory is gold like a Notre Dame helmet. That makes me more uncomfortable with this
The
on.
Golden Dome, the Golden Dome. But like, what if that happens? Because like,
Look, if Notre Dame
or here,
wins,
let's. I got a would you, not kind of like a would you rather, but more of like a what do you think is more likely? What's more likely that if Marcus Freeman beats Ohio State, that he is interviewed and offered a job at Ohio State, or is offered a job from the NFL?
the Bears, I think, will absolutely come calling because that rumor is already starting to happen. But my thought is if Notre Dame wins, two coaches might lose their jobs. If you're saying Ryan Day is one, I think the other one's down in Baton Rouge because
Really?
something tells me you took that job because you're saying nobody can win at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're telling me that the board of trustees see Notre Dame win a national championship before you do, with all of your resources, all of your money, you're working in the SEC. And I don't know if you saw this story. I saw this come out recently. Brian Kelly's coaching tree is actually pretty damn good underneath him. When he was a coach at Central Michigan, I'm trying to
Right.
remember who was underneath him. A few like really notable names both in college and in the NFL were underneath him. And he's always had this reputation of just not being the nicest guy. Apparently he did like some special like holiday party and he had his coaches as like valet to like park all the cars. For
Wow.
that night when he was in Central Michigan. And it was, and I have to go back and find it. So I'm not gonna be able to make it for this episode, but I'll find it and share with you privately. It's insane. We look at the like
That's
list of people who are,
wild.
yeah. So uh if I'm in Baton Rouge and going, well, you told me that's what it was, and apparently that's not the case. There's only one common factor here, bud. That's you.
Yeah.
So
I,
that would
well, I,
be
I don't know if he necessarily gets fired immediately, but I definitely think 100% if LSU isn't in contention for the SEC or even the playoffs, I think he's
yep.
absolutely fired next season 100%. Yeah, I just with Marcus Freeman being an OSU alum, we've seen it. A lot of people like to go home. They like to win, and I don't know what his dedication is. I don't know if he's like a guy like Mario who wants to bring his pro. I mean, it's not like OSU has, by the way, been in the bottom of the barrel, the dregs of college football. But there is a major hump in the name of Michigan that is standing in their way the last couple of years, and they have not been able to win a championship since 2014. Now, out of the hypothetical simulator and into reality, you know, statistically, Ohio State has a clear advantage. Whether it's the better team statistically, or whether you look down the roster, they have the deeper depth. They're the team that's pretty much going to win. So let's start thinking: how does Notre Dame win this game? Like, what do you think are the keys to Notre Dame winning this game?
Man, as much as I don't want to imagine that, it's just doing what they've been doing. It's playing really, really good defense and kind of doing what Georgia Tech did to Miami to bring us all back home.
Yeah,
Hold on, run clock, run the ball because
that's what I have as well.
Yeah, is Riley Leonard is basically just yeah, I'm so emotionally scarred by that game that I don't even want to think about Georgia Tech quarterback name Haynes King. Just came back to me.
Yep.
You're basically running that playbook together. If you could just get chunk play after chunk play, because again, the one thing we've talked about, I think Ohio State has, overcome every criticism that we've had and that everybody's had about them not being tough enough after that loss to Michigan and also their earlier loss to Oregon. But the blueprint to beat them is out physical them. No one's been
Yeah.
able to do it since those two games, but that's the way that I would expect Notre Dame to do it and to force a couple turnovers, lock down those receivers. Uh, because Ohio State doesn't necessarily have the running game. I think what we talked about, and you mentioned this earlier in other episodes, Chris, but Brian Kelly is kind of like broken out of that shell of being like, I have to be the Ohio State offensive coordinator and run
Chip
the ball
Kelly.
all the time. Chip Kelly, yes.
Yes.
Yes. To say I can open up the playbook and run the offense I like to and
Hmm.
throw the ball over the place to Ibuka, to Jeremiah Smith, throw it up there. They're going to catch it. There's nobody better than them out there.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. So if they could be the other gold, helmeted team, Georgia Tech, that's how to do it.
Yeah, I have three. Mine's a three-headed monster, two of which revolve around injuries. So the first one is they have to play keep away, ground and pound against that OSU D line, and avoid making those mistakes on the O line because they'll be the left tackle that they're going to be replacing, who was injured in the last game. Even if he comes in at 80%, you've got edge guys on that Ohio State defense that are studs. And I mean, and if you thought that what's his name from Penn State? Who's that? Who's their edge rusher?
Oh, I know you're talking about. Yeah, uh, that
Abdul
name,
Carter. Abdul Carter. If you thought
first
Abdul
round
Carter
draft
was,
pick.
if you thought that guy was a menace, they've got two of them at Ohio State. So it's to me, it's like they've got to ground and pound. They've got to play that run game, do exactly what that. It was so funny you mentioned that's exactly what I was thinking. As terrible as it is, clearly we're disturbed and scarred from that Georgia Tech game. They got to play that Georgia Tech playbook. Just keep the ball out of Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith's hands. Don't let them get on the field. Keep them on the sidelines as long as possible. And then the O line has to at least give Riley Leonard a few seconds because if Riley Leonard when pressured and when the guys get in the backfield, one of the worst. I think he's like 120th in the league. When he's clean and when he's not as pressured, he's like 36th. So like the guy definitely does better when there's zero pressure. He can make some moves, but again, to me, it's you got to have a run game, which it's I don't know how they're going to do that against OSU, and you've got to keep your QB clean, give him some time. And then the third thing, they're going to need the luck of the Irish. They're going to need a crucial turnover late in the game or a crucial stop late in the game. Yeah, if Notre Dame wins, trust me, that will be one of the factors. That will be one of the things that happens in this game for them to win the national championship is they will have to either get a late turnover or a late stop that just changes the momentum of the game or seals the game for them to take it home. Now on the other side, I know this is a stupid question, but what do you think? How do you think OSU wins the championship? How does this game go?
I think they're going to force a few turnovers on defense because look, Notre Dame needs to bring a spatula with them because they
Mhm.
need to be peeling Riley Leonard off of that turf every couple of downs because they're going to run him a lot. And look, credit to the kid because he's been running all season long. And at this point, I don't know how he's being held together just because he's young and he could probably still like regenerate limbs if he
Yeah.
needs to at this point. But like they're going to wear out that quarterback. And at some point, that ball's going to come loose. I just feel like
Yeah.
against Ohio State of all teams, that's how they do it. And offensively, they can be as explosive as they want because now that they don't really have like the chains on them as they felt like they did earlier in the season, they could throw it as much as they need to. When you got two guys who are always wide open, that's a problem. If they can get a running game going, I don't know how this game could be close. This could be one of those where it's like Notre Dame's getting blown out in another national championship game. This is not the same Notre Dame team, but this Ohio State team has been on such a tear since
Yeah.
that loss to Michigan that it's totally possible they do that again, and it pains me to say that. The only other thing that they need to do also is bring themselves raincoats and make sure that that artificial turf doesn't get too slippery. Because if Lou Holt kicks loud on the sideline before the game, it's going to be a very slippery surface, and they got to make sure to be prepared for that.
Yeah. For me, it is they got to exploit the injuries. They've got to make sure that you've got Riley Leonard who's kind of banged up. You got an O lineman, a crucial O lineman, a tackle who's banged up and is probably going to be out. You have to exploit those injuries. Defensive line with that needs to be dominant, stopping the run. Because again, you want to make sure you can get off the field and get your offense back on the field. And then obviously with their offense, very simple, get their weapons open and separated. If they can, I mean, because Notre Dame loves to play man coverage. So that can either, if I mean, Marcus Freeman believes in his guys, obviously enough to where, they run that constantly. But again, with the weapons that they have, OSU has, if they choose to play man like they have, and they can get that separation, I think it's a done deal. I think just the defense, holding the line, they don't even need to get pressure, just holding the line, and then those offensive weapons getting open and separate and getting separation. I think that's it. I think it's a very easy win by at least, I would say, two possessions, either a 10 or 14 point game. I'm not going to make a guess because I think I just had this random thought. And it would not surprise me in the slightest because this is kind of what happened with Michigan, but maybe they learned from the Michigan game. Maybe they come in here really high and mighty and they get smacked in the face by Notre Dame.
Look, it's possible. That would definitely be a death knell for Ryan Day if that
Oh,
happened.
absolutely. I mean, again, let's okay, game aside because we obviously think. Let's make a real prediction, okay? No scores. We know obviously Ohio State's going to win. Your prediction, what happens if Ohio State loses?
Oh man, Ryan Day is on the hottest of hot seats because this whole like, okay, he can't win the big one. You got this far. I would say that you beat Oregon. That was great, but that didn't really do anything for you in terms of the college football playoff scenario. If you played Oregon for the national title and got that over, that's great. But you did in the Rose Bowl game. They kind of moved the goalposts on him, right? Like it's sad to say that you're getting to this point, but what if you're an Ohio State fan? If it doesn't happen this year, when is it going to happen? That's the thought that I would come to
Yeah.
because if you look at the landscape of college football this year, this was your year. You've been favored to do this all year long. Yes, Oregon was always the number one team in the country because they were undefeated. They won the heads up game, but all the experts said Ohio State was the real number one team.
I
That's
mean,
what
they
they were
have
saying.
the best, they have the most talent. Their talent acquisition is flawless.
Right. They had the most talent, the highest, NIL, number. Even though Oregon's was actually higher, but everyone talked about Ohio State's number.
Right.
Their whole insulated like Ohio versus the world thing that they've been doing. Like, if this wasn't the year, what year is it going to be?
Yeah.
You're never going to see, I think, as flat of a playing field in college football as they had this year in the playoff. So that's where you take it from there and say, is he safe? I don't know. There might be a coaching hire out there that says we'll find a way to make this happen if you can't do it. Uh, so yeah, that's one fallout from it. We talked about the other two. You either have to worry about Notre Dame, everybody stays home, or there's going to be this exodus where Marcus Freeman gets hired and goes to the Chicago Bears. Al Golden might go back to Penn State and be their defensive coordinator after all that. Speaking of beating your alma mater, I think his name as a DC has gotten hotter in the Big Ten world, not necessarily anywhere else because of our history with Al
Right.
Golden. He's a different person, yes, but defense is different. You didn't coach defense down here.
Right.
Um, Brian Kelly gets on the hot seat because of what's going on. I just feel like you have to really be worried if Notre Dame keeps all of their pieces together and they win, because you're going to see players say, "I can go to a softer schedule, and I'll even go this
I
far."
got it. I'm sleeping.
Okay. Give me 5 minutes to finish this.
Okay.
All right. Love you. Give me 5.
Oh,
All right. Close the door on your way
as
out. Love
cute.
you. Go ahead. You're saying, Rudy?
I'll just say the one thing that I think is really concerning out of this is if you look at the way college football has gone right now, should Notre Dame win and they keep everybody home, so let's say Al Golden doesn't get hired away, Marcus Freeman stays, you have a program that is getting $50 million a year from NBC by themselves. They're not playing in a super conference. They will never play in a super conference. If you look at the way college football is being played right now, you just learn that your first round bye means precisely nothing
Yeah.
because you
Everyone lost.
need to play to keep your momentum going to win games.
Right.
So, what's the point of a super conference now?
Yeah. I think if Ohio State loses, I think Ryan Day's out for one of two reasons. Either he's fired or he himself quits. I think the pressure on him will be just too immense. I think he'll go to the NFL most likely because there's enough vacancies there that he can go there, and it's less on him. He did what he did. He did what he could do at Ohio State. It wasn't enough for them. It was. I mean, and again, just like you were saying, like if not now, then when, right? And then I
Yep.
think on the inverse side of that, I think from an Ohio State, from a campus perspective, I think they're thinking the same thing. They're like, listen, we've given you all this time. You've had all the success. You still can't beat the team we need you to beat, right? Which is the most important game in their book, which is kind of stupid, but I get it. And then you've gotten to the CFP, what, 3, 4 times, and you can't win. You know what I mean? It's like it's kind of improving. Not only that, but you lost to a team. And again, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on Notre Dame, but there is no world where at the beginning of the season I picked Notre Dame to win the college football.
No,
You know what I mean? There's
no.
no way I thought they were going to win the playoffs. There was never, especially after the Northern Illinois game, but even now, You know what I mean? Like, to me, it would be probably one of the greatest upsets in the history of college football if Notre Dame wins this, you know? So I think there's a lot at stake. I think I'm obviously gonna watch it just because there's so many great storylines in this. You have your potential first black coach winning, him possibly beating his alma mater. You have Ryan Day finally getting over that hump. I'm not cheering for either team, you know. I don't want to see either team win, but I think there's a lot of cool storylines that go along with this. Anything we didn't cover, Rudy, that you wanted to talk about?
There is something really random, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was in terms of this whole grand scheme of things with college football. There was
Mhm.
something that I'm a little angry that we're like live recording this, and the thought just completely vanished out of my head, and that's driving me abs. Oh, I know exactly what it is. Okay,
Let's go.
I'm so glad this popped back into my head. Thank goodness we're not in Alzheimer's territory yet. All this noise that Miami's made in the offseason. Yes, Miami wins the offseason all the time. They got the transfer quarterback. They've got they're bringing in talent. There's one group that's quiet right now, at least on the national landscape. I haven't seen enough like ACC wise to wonder what's going on, but Bill Belichick in North Carolina, have they made any moves since joining?
Listen, as the philosopher and prophet Lil Wayne once said, my ninjas move in silence. Okay. So, something tells me Bill might be up to something. And he's just moving in silence. Or, I mean, Jesus, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's just using this as a stepping board and he's like, I don't care. He's like, I'll ride this thing till the wheels fall off and then maybe get a job in the NFL. Who knows?
Well, that's my thought, right? Because like that was such a like hot button moment for all of like a week where it's like Mike Lombardi, his GM, is like taking shots saying like Mario Cristobal can't develop quarterbacks, and Mario very Dennis Smith, who was on his recruiting team, saying like, hey, stay in your lane, bud. We now have Carson Beck after Cam Ward after all this stuff going on. It's like all these free agencies that have happened through the transfer portal, you don't hear anything. And the one thing about college sports is you can't keep it as tight knit as they do in the NFL in terms of like what
Yeah.
the roster look like. So if there's a kid that's being out there that's being pursued, you're gonna hear about it. The kid's either gonna say, "I'm so honored to be been received an offer from North Carolina and Bill Belichick," or "Hey, I'm in the portal. I'm looking at North Carolina." I expected, I think, more of a like immediate tide turning there for them in terms of momentum. Like they weren't in the running for Carson Beck
No, and
at all.
I think the Carson Beck thing, I think that was NFL, Miami, or bust. Like those were the
Mhm.
only three options on there for him. And I think in terms of Bill, I think the fact that he is having to rebuild everything front office, because that's what he said he wanted to do. He wanted to turn North Carolina into a pro style, program. And so I think he's building a front office. He's getting all his ducks in a row now. And don't be surprised if in that spring portal window, we see a
Yep.
little bit more action going his way. Because I think that's when he'll strike. I think again, one of two things. Either Bill's so washed up that he's just going to ride this thing till the wheels fall off, or he is Bill Belichick, one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach in the in football period, that he is scheming behind the scenes right now, getting all his ducks in a row and is waiting for the perfect time to strike, And again, I know one of the big things was North Carolina had a problem recruiting in North Carolina. So maybe he's trying to like repair those bridges and start setting up camp in different areas of North Carolina to get some recruits in terms for next year. Not 2025, but 2026. You know what I mean? He's looking at those classes because the 2025 classes are kind of already in. So that's kind of a wash for him. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I still think the allure of Bill Belichick, that's why I said watch this next spring window, is still gonna hold value. It's still gonna stay afloat. We'll just have to see how he does in that first season, you know?
Yep.
Well, Rudy, we got another one in the books. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe on this video. I always wait to the end because I don't want to bother you guys at the beginning. And hopefully we made it worth your while to do those three things for us. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.
Don't cry too hard on Monday night.
Exactly. We'll just ignore it, Like I love when people say, like, yo, last time Ohio State won was in 2014 and in 2002. I'm like, they did not win in 2002.
No, they won neither of those. They won neither
They
of those.
stole them. They stole 2002. We'll see y'all later. Be good.